Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back in that video today, and we're going to be talking about the Houston Texans and another draft video. I started making these draft videos a couple weeks ago, and I talked about Bryce Young. And when I started, I thought that it was a little too early to be talking about the draft because we don't know where the Texans will be picking because there's still 4 games left in the season. Yes, most likely the Texans will get the number 1 pick, but where does the pick land with the Texans from the Browns? Because they still have 4 games remaining as well. But there's a chance that we can get the 12th pick. There's a chance that we could get the lowest from maybe like the 8th or the 9th. And there's a chance that if the Browns win some ball games, maybe they can make the playoffs and we can be in the teens, the 19 to 17 or 16 area. But, I was thinking about what I wanted to see the Texans do with that pick from the Browns. And I know a lot of people, they want the Texans to pick O-line, which, I think is a real need for the Houston Texans. And I think that the Texans definitely need to work on their O-line. And I think that could be, in my opinion, I think with the money that the Texans have in free agency, I think that could be something you can work on free agency with the Texans. The money that they had to spend in free agency, I think the Texans can very well work on the O-line in free agency. Some other people think that the Texans will go after the defensive line, which I wouldn't mind the Texans to do that either, which I also think the Texans can, maybe go get a decent defensive end or defensive tackle in free agency because the Texans have a lot of money to spend this year. They have money like the Jaguars had last year. And we saw the Jaguars go get a bunch of free agents. We saw the Jaguars overpay Christian Kirk, and look how that's turned out for them. We saw the Jaguars make a lot of solid moves, and they've picked up an enormous amount of guys like Evan Ingram, and the list moves on to, and they've done, they haven't been bad, but they've been decent. They just beat the Titans by 14 last week. So the Texans have kind of like money that the Jags had to spent in 2000 or last season. So yeah. Or if you want to go past seasons, look how much money the Patriots had to spend the year before that. They spent a lot of money really early. So I can see the Texans kind of being like the team like the Jaguars last year that spent a lot of free agency and a lot of money in free agency. So moving to that, O-line, defensive line, that's out of the question. Now here's something that I've been thinking for the Texans, and I think a lot of other people have been thinking this too. What about a second running back with Dameon Pierce? And I would, as a Longhorns fan and as a Texans fan, and combining this together, how about the Texans drafting Bijan Robinson, one of the biggest stars in college football we've ever seen at the running back position in a while. And this man, Bijan, was the leader of this Longhorns football team. And I would, how much it would mean to me for the Texans to draft him, because how much I think that this would improve the Texans. Not only that, but then I get to root for Bijan, because the hardest part about him leaving the Longhorns is if he gets drafted by someone else, which most likely he will. If the Texans are probably not going to draft him, but this is a possibility. But then I got to root for him on another team because, Bijan was really special for the Longhorns, and I really loved what he did for them. And also, I thought that the Texans going with a 2 running back attack would be amazing for this team, especially if you have Bryce Young as the quarterback. He's loved playing with talented running backs. And I didn't say running back, I said running backs. He's loved playing with multiple great skilled running backs, and I think Dameon Pierce and Bijan Robinson would be a very, very, very scary duo as running backs for the Houston Texans. I kind of see them being like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb of the Browns, but kind of like how it was a couple years ago. Not how Kareem Hunt's playing this year, but how it was in like when the Browns were like really their run game was scary because they had Kareem Hunt. He could go get you 100 yards one game. Then Nick Chubb could get you 100 yards a game, or both of them could do it. And I think Bryce Young, Dameon Pierce is kind of more of a well, they're both great at running, but Bijan's more of a catching back, and I think that would be huge for. I mean, with the Longhorns this year, he had 325 receiving yards and had 1,500 rushing yards with 18 touchdowns or 20 total touchdowns, 18 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. I think Bijan would. Well, they're both great receiving running backs, but I think Bijan would be great. A great receiving running back with the Houston Texans. And I know you're probably thinking, like, why draft another running back when we need a wide receiver? I'm going to be honest, there are some great wide receivers in this draft class, but I really feel like the Texans can go after a decent wide receiver in free agency. A couple names I've had on my list is Noah Brown. He's had an underrated season with the Dallas Cowboys this year. He's been the third option and he's had a great year. And then also they could have John Minchie returning from leukemia. He's had good signs. It hasn't been reported yet that he might return, but I've been keeping track with his health all year, and he's doing really good. So there is a chance that John Minchie returns next season. You got Nico Collins. As of right now, you still have Brandon Cooks. And, honestly, I'd rather have the Houston Texans draft a wide receiver in the second or third round like they've done the last couple of years with John Minchie and Nico Collins than in the first round. I know the first round is where you can find really a lot of talented wide receivers, but you can also really find talented wide receivers in the second or third round. I would like the Texans to draft a wide receiver in the third round and then maybe draft an O-lineman in the second round and then a defensive player, and then go to defense later in the draft. I think that would be the move for the Houston Texans. And, Bijan Robinson and Dameon Pierce would be very hard to deal with defense. And I'm going to preview this I want you to, in your head, figure the Texans offense with Bryce Young at quarterback. On the left side, you got Bijan. On the right side, you got Dameon Pierce. Kind of would remind me a little bit like what the 49ers got. Sometimes they'll put on the left side, they'll put Deebo Samuel. On the right side, you got Christian McCaffrey. You have no idea who they're going to give the ball to. It's hard. Like if Dameon Pierce is on the right and Bijan's on the left, who are they going to hand the ball off to? Who's he going to throw it to? So it's a very hard thing to deal with defense, and I think that the Houston Texans with a 2 running back attack would be just it would fix their offense a little bit because their offense has been exactly the worst offense in the NFL. Actually, I would say that our offense has been the second worst offense in the NFL this year besides the Broncos. Well, actually, I would go with the Broncos' offense has been better than the Texans because the Broncos have had an awful head coach, awful offensive head coach. I'm not saying the Texans haven't, but I don't know who's been more disappointing on offense, the Broncos or Texans. It's pretty much a tie because they both stanked up the league this year. But I think the offense for the Houston Texans would massively improve if the Texans drafted Bijan Robinson. Do I see it happening? Probably not, but I think that it's definitely a possibility for the Houston Texans, and I think wherever that pick is, if it's at 12 or if it's at 15, I don't know if Bijan will fall to 15 in that scenario, but I think Bijan could definitely fall to 12 right now. If the Texans they would have the 12th pick at the end of the day if the season ended today from that pick from the Browns. So I could definitely see Bijan falling to the Texans. The question is, do they draft him? The only reason why they would consider not doing it is because you already have Dameon Pierce, who has been so great this year. But I think it would be great for the Texans to have 2 really good running backs on their roster. I think it would become scary. I think they would become a scary offense. I really do. But then you got to work on your receiver. You're getting your receivers better because Bryce Young, if Bryce Young is a Texan, if the Texans do draft Bryce Young, he he's got to have some good wide receivers. I like Nico Collins. I think he's a great wide receiver, but he's not a number one in this league. So you got Nico Collins, you got John Minchie. So, and then I think you maybe sign a guy like Noah Brown. I like Noah Brown. I think he's a really talented wide receiver, and he's put up some great stats this year as the third wide receiver for the Cowboys. And, I'd like the idea of looking at a wide receiver in the second or third round. I think the Texans could have a great view of doing that. So let me know what you guys think about my kind of like, I'm not saying this is an off-season plan, but, I mean, we've kind of drawn an outlook of what it could look like if we draft Bijan and you have a 2 running back attack and you draft a O-lineman in the second round and then a wide receiver in the third round, and what this Texans offense could look like moving on in 2023. That's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think about the Texans potentially drafting Bijan Robinson. That's it, and hope you guys enjoyed. Go Texans.